Hello there. Welcome to whatever we're calling this show. Welcome to SiDEQuest. Today, we are joined by the boss man, the myth, the legend himself, Triton, aka ArcTriton 4466, aka whatever other aliases you use.
Good friend and Bod. I really do like that one. Hey, how's it going? Thank you for having me as part of the show today. I've been listening to you guys for the past couple episodes, and I've really wanted to hop in and geek out with you for a little bit.
Of course, of course. So, what's swirling around in your guys' heads?
I do, and mostly off of the past couple episodes, and one of them being the Yuuzhan Vong, and I am a fan of the Yuuzhan Vong because I think that they're totally unique and interesting, and whether they are kind of like the replacement bad guy for an antagonist and all that kind of stuff. I think it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating that basically everything is kind of like in preparation for their arrival and stuff like that. I just think that's cool. I really had some questions to go further as to like why the Vong left their galaxy. And from what I understand, that has to do with them fighting some kind of massive war, whether or not it was between organic beings or robots. I believe I heard something about robots or something like that, and that's why they hate technology. But basically, they had to leave their galaxy because it was utterly used up and destroyed in the midst of this giant war that they had. And I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Indeed. So, yes, there was a massive droid war in that galaxy over 15,000 years VVY between two species, if you want to call them species or units or I don't know, whatever you want to call them, the Silentium and the Abominor. So these this was actually like a good example of a retcon, taking pieces from two previously obscure races from obscure Star Wars media. In this case, I believe the droids cartoon from the mid 80s and the Lando books, I believe. He had a short series of novels based around his adventures. So these Sorry, say that again. Your audio cut out.
You said the story of the robots comes from the 80s?
The robots themselves, yes. The races which took place, the Silentium and Abominor. The Silentium kind of look like Reapers from Mass Effect, if you know them. And
I don't.
Well, metal spheres and cephalopod-like things, and the only real unifying design philosophy are these glowing red eyes. And the Abominor are said to come in a myriad different shapes, but the one we see is kind of started as kind of a silly 80s, obviously must have been the same animators who did Transformers, because it does look very similar. I'll pull up an image. So yes, the Vong distaste for anything mechanical comes from their war spilling onto the Yuuzhan Vong homeworld, from which they rose up and forced both of the droid factions to flee said galaxy as well.
Okay, so wait, who created these, would you call them Silentium?
No one knows. Mystery. One of the eternal mysteries.
I'm gonna look this up. So really, these ideas like came up way before the books came out, because those books didn't come out until like the 2000s or 90s or something like that. So really, those ideas of that kind of
those
stuff.
particular droid species themselves. I say species. Yeah, I'm not sure if
I mean, it technically would be a species. I mean, they kind of consider themselves their own.
yeah.
Okay.
That's one of the things I've always adored about Star Wars is taking old material and tying it in together with new. So yes, the Vong's technophobia has its origins in their distant past.
I guess, okay, so now I'm starting to sit here and I'm looking, and this is bringing up something that I was thinking about earlier, is the fact that, okay, so these creatures are created, the Vong have a problem. They have the Force at that time. So while they don't have the Force at the time that they make it to our galaxy and all that stuff happens, they did have the Force while they were amidst their own galaxy. And actually, that was like they were given abilities and stuff by this sentient planet. So that draws some really other interesting things, right? So Sonoma de Car, am I saying that right? Sonoma de Car? Am I saying it right?
That was later. That's the offspring.
But that's an offspring of their planet. It's and what the Vong believe is their basically their connection to the Force, leaving them, and they're trying to find it and catch up with it. Where they find it in our galaxy, and they're like, "Oh my God, that must be, the whatever you want to call it, reincarnation of our deity," and all this kind of stuff. Because technically, when they left their own planet, they destroyed their galaxy through this war. So I guess the planet gave them the ability to use the Force to take on this race of robots. But then eventually they just became more steeped, or they just kept steeping themselves into their warlike culture. And then it brought them to the point where basically the Force decided that they weren't responsible enough to even use the Force. And so I just love, I think that's so like crazy that like your own planet decides whether or not your species is like worthy to use the Force. I just think that's really cool. So you think of like a planet like humanity that's constantly like warring with each other and stuff like that. Like that'd be like an interesting like little thing to, I don't know. I just think that's really cool. So it makes you wonder like the galaxy at large.
In the case of the Vong, their planet was a, actual sentient. I mean, not to discount the beliefs of anybody who's like, believes in a literal Mother Earth or whatever, but as in an actual communicatable singular entity is
like a giant like clam stuck in space.
Like it's just imagine if Earth had a brain. I guess of sorts. Although I imagine the consciousness would be very different. But
I mean, they talk to the solos and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure.
Yes, I do believe so.
What it talks to, not they. I guess it would be they if it's all. I don't know. I love that. We could literally sit there and talk about the makeup of this planet for the rest of the show. But
yeah, no, that's always been a fascinating concept to me as well. Like I know some people find it's like, oh, it's a little bit like too out there, which I mean, fair, but Star Wars has always been space fantasy rather than true sci-fi in terms of how plausible a lot of the concepts it presents are. But I've never had issue with some of these wackier concepts. Right. So, Theogek, what do you think about wacky concepts like living planets or whatever? Like do you think it's too much at times, or do you prefer when fiction has a more grounded sense of reality?
I'm pseudo biology major. I took several classes, advanced classes in it, and I'm fascinated by the idea that you can grow organic structures and actually have them support non-organic structures. There was an experiment done, or they were still working on it in the late 1990s, where they were trying to teach algae how to grow itself. In other words, you would use the algae as a disk drive, and when that chunk of algae got full, it would grow another section automatically, and then you'd have more memory. And so that was a pretty fascinating concept. You know, that quartz crystals are used to set the time inside every computer. Is interesting.
Right. Like I saw this fascinating post that was like, you know, if you plopped somebody from like some fantasy setting and showed them like a computer, you know, like if you showed like a alchemist wizard, whatever, he'd be like, oh no, that makes sense. So yeah, you take a bunch of rare metals and crystals out of the earth, enchant them with electricity, take more magic things out to assemble, assemble runes, yeah, and it conducts the magic through it. It's like all a matter of perspective, I suppose.
Yes, I would agree. I think I'm in more favor than that than trying to build a quantum computer. Um, for organic substances, to a certain degree, clearly not viruses and bacteria, but to a certain degree, biological or organic substances can be kept well contained. I don't know you have that if you develop a thinking robot or a thinking attack robot or
Concerned about AI uprising. Understandable.
well, yes, in a singularity point where we interface with computers. I
See how
have strong
HK47
feelings
turned
about
out.
it.
IG88.
Yes, exactly. So in our own stories and lore, we know how things turn out if we get too zealous in pursuit of creating these machines that will do everything for us and protect us and everything else. So I like Star Wars for that. I love the cantina when in Mos Eisley when they walk into the bar, the music they're playing. I think that's just hilarious.
Yes, there's something to be said about having such a more Star Wars is very much a hybrid of high tech and low tech in such an indescribably good way. Like in that, yes, there's advanced technology, but it's all grimy and means like I just love the fact that that one scene where I believe in Empire Strikes Back, Han walks into the cockpit, has to bash his fist against the like frame of the door to get the lights to turn on. That was actually real. That the lights didn't turn on. It just adds so much character to just the setting at because contrast that to Star Trek. I know this is a conversation that's been had literally since the 70s, but just something to be said about that lived-in feeling of the aesthetic and everything.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think computers and robots and all of these things could be wonderful. I mean, For instance, I'm disabled. If I had something that could help me throughout the day, that would be a wonderful thing. But I just get concerned when we connect weapons to these things. I think we ask for a whole series of problems we don't need.
Right. That's there's always cause for concern.
But lightsabers, are the coolest thing ever. So they're in the middle of this organic inorganic mess too.
Very true, very true. But looks like we're getting close on time. Are there any closing thoughts you guys want to discuss, or?
Oh man, too many to count. Especially just going off, but we still haven't even I haven't covered everything that I want to talk about with this whole war in their galaxy and everything like that. For one, think about we think about the chances of you being able to leave your galaxy and then actually make it to another galaxy, and then the chances that it would be a galaxy that wasn't just totally whatever, lifeless and all that kind of stuff. Not to say that any galaxy would be lifeless, but I mean, just imagine some galaxies out there that are void of life entirely and all this kind of stuff. So the fact that they made it to our that's interesting. And it's also interesting to think that these aliens that they had forced out also made it to our galaxy, both species. So the two species of aliens are robots that were fighting in their galaxy. Also, because when the Yuuzhan Vong forced them out, made it to our galaxy. I just think that's really cool. And whether or not that Star Wars fans really trying to connect everything together, which I think it's easier to do that way. If you tie it all back to our galaxy, the randomness has a point. And makes
it's a galaxy far, far away.
Well, I'm very much a believer that the Zhao are just humanity in the future, and whether or not it's the reversification, if we go back in time from our own future.
Well, that sounds like a conversation for the upcoming episode. Wink, 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 hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
And let's get into that later. But I think that our story is a reversification. I think we go to this other galaxy, but then we end up coming back to this galaxy in the future. It's we go back in time, but not really, because space and time, when you think about galaxies, is totally different. So I don't know. Anyway, I'd like to get into it. Yes, very much. That's it. That's all I've got. I mean, I really want to get in more of these robots and what I think the way it does. Carl was saying some really cool stuff the other night about the basic laws of robots, and you basically have to program a robot with 3 functions, and if those 3 aren't met, you're basically creating a killing machine. So I don't know. I like talking to them. But how are we doing on time?
We ought to wrap this up, but you can definitely talk more with on this topic, which I'm very interested. But all right, thank you, audience, for joining us, and